Join us as we go beyond the pixels in the Gamer's Edge podcast, the podcast that takes you behind the scenes of video gaming. In each episode, we transcend the boundaries of mere pixels, immersing ourselves in the very essence of gaming and esports. Exclusive interviews with rising stars poised to redefine the industry, conversations with seasoned veterans sharing their tales of triumph and tribulation, insights from coaches and commentators who breathe life into every battle, as well as industry leaders that create the heartbeat of esports. Whether you harbour dreams of becoming a professional gamer, are a devoted fan eager to explore the hidden narratives, or simply find yourself captivated by the intricate workings of gaming and esports, the Gamer's Edge is your front row ticket. So fellow gamers, let's unite and explore. For in the dynamic landscapes of virtual competition, the Gamer's Edge podcast is your beacon, guiding you through the labyrinth of gaming excellence. So get ready for a thrilling adventure through the virtual arenas, where victory, camaraderie, and endless adventure await.
How we doing, guys? Welcome into another episode of the Gamer's Edge podcast. I am joined by a special guest today. Justin, thank you so much for taking some time out of your busy schedule to sit down with me. How we doing today?
Good. You know, it's my pleasure. Happy to be here.
Well, we're gonna dive right into this because I know you're a busy man. So we're gonna keep the ball rolling here. Can you share for our listeners a little bit about your background and your journey to lead you into specializing in esports law?
Yeah, so I started in the more traditional entertainment and sports world, and for over a decade I've been an attorney and working with all different athletes and musicians and creative people. And about 8 years ago, I kind of noticed what was coming in North America and what was going on in the US, and it was growing. I've always been a big gamer, and I was a big StarCraft and StarCraft 2 fan, so I knew how big, esports and gaming was in South Korea and like what it was like there. But it wasn't until around then I really started to see it growing and coming on my radar, and then I just started to understand and examine the different individuals and professionals involved in it, and noticed a lane for myself, someone who had a little different expertise and experience and network, and coming from this more traditional entertainment world, understanding how to operate in both. And from there, I just started to work with different agents on behalf of their players, and from there started to work with my own players and coaches and casters and teams and brands, and just really been helping people ever since. And it's obviously there's a lot of legal stuff going on, from contracts to trademark and brand protection to visas and LLCs and corporations, and just really a whole world that exists in the entertainment field, but is really kind of growing here. So found a nice little lane for myself.
Yeah, we see it a lot, especially here in Call of Duty. The Carolina Ravens just had to make a substitute because one of their players was not able to make it in due to a visa issue. So I will jump right into a question I had later in the broadcast, but I'm going to jump right into it now. How can esports organizations and professionals navigate immigration matters, especially when dealing with international players or talents trying to come into the U.S.?
I think the biggest thing, and I work with different players and helping them with their visas, is that the way that the current framework for these departments, the way that the immigration officers, they examine the applications, they're just not currently structured for really how esports is and how the industry is. It's very structured on more traditional sports, being signed to, an NBA team and you're a foreign player, or you're, getting signed to the New York Rangers, so you're coming over from Sweden. Like, they understand what being signed to an NHL team means. However, coming over to compete in a Call of Duty or a Fortnite event, some of these things don't really fit into their criteria, so it makes it really difficult. And I know the owner of Moist Esports had commented that he had encountered similar problems trying to get visas for his players, where the examiner just didn't really understand, wasn't that familiar with the industry, what's going on here, and as a result, it takes way longer. Or, you have to spend more time trying to answer all of these, RFEs, which are requests for evidence. And then, like you said, you have players missing deadlines, missing tournaments, missing starts of season. And this has kind of been going on for years in esports. It's almost like every year you see, team misses tournament. Or I remember it was when Overwatch League started, like the whole Philadelphia Fusion wasn't there at the beginning because they couldn't get their visas. And it was just like, these were just things that were because of how things are structured. Yeah. However, you have other countries like Germany where they've created a whole different visa category for, esports competitors and athletes and people working at these companies and people supporting it. So that's really why, the problem is.
So you think it's just the U.S. is a little bit behind the times as far as that portion of trying to get players in?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, this, the legislation, the way the statutes and the classifications are, it's just from a different age, right? Before you had this whole idea, like we had these players that played on a game that was more, not really assigned to a team, not really a season. It's more like, we have big tournaments here and there and you compete. It's more, open qualifier style. And it was really hard to kind of fit them into the criteria to get a visa. Like, because they're not signed to a team, they don't have a solid contract, a year or 2 year long deal that you could show. You're missing a whole huge component of the application, gotcha. Right? So if you're missing one of the key criteria, you can try to, beef up some of the other stuff. But if you have that, it's like, okay, great, like check. But just the way that game, that circuit is structured, it's not really built for that. Obviously, you can think about fighting game community like that. Fortnite community is very similar where, most orgs don't really have Fortnite players signed really, right? Most of them are competing independently for the most part.
Now, touch back just a little bit here. You bring this wealth of knowledge, especially on this subject, but you've also written a book, The Essential Guide to the Business and Law of Esports and Professional Video Gaming. So what inspired you to write that? And does that as well touch on some of these subjects that I'm sure we're going to go over in this conversation?
Yeah, so it was definitely something where I felt like there was just kind of a huge knowledge void from, the practitioner side to even, the talent themselves, people working in the companies, the professionals. And I felt that there were only a few people really working at this consistently at a high level that could really speak on it. And I felt that there was just nothing really on the legal or business side of this. Most of the stuff was more like the history of esports or, stuff more focused on that or really just on video game development and design and those legal issues. So this more brought it towards my world where, esports, the competitive side, as well as kind of the professional video gaming, where in my head, that's people that are professionals in the video game space. So whether you're content creators, streamers, coaches, analysts, casters, people who their career is in this video game competitive world. Yeah. So as a result, there was a lot of legal and business matters, as some of them that we mentioned, immigration, copyright, trademark, corporations and LLCs, social media disclosures, and different considerations for throwing events, like the licenses you need and different insurance and permit, and just really a bunch of the business and legal considerations for all of these different businesses, and really trying to bring together this guide where something where you could read cover to cover and you could really know a lot. My inspiration kind of came from in the music business. It's Donald Passman wrote All You Need to Know About the Music Business. And it's really a book that like you read kind of cover to cover and then you go back to it and reread sections, and it's, not necessarily just for law professors or law students or college students. It's written for, if you're a manager or an agent or, you're a rapper, a musician, or any of these people that's not just an academic. And that was kind of the approach I had with my book was, if you're starting an esports team, you're throwing an event, or if you're trying to get into this as a creator or, a manager, an agent, these are some of the things you need to know. These are what some of the contracts look like. These are some of the important considerations for a player contract or a coach deal or, endorsements or all these things that you should just be aware of if you're in this specific space. So really was excited to write it. And now it's exciting. I get to teach different classes using it and it's fun.
Yeah, and I believe it's you are teaching at 4 different institutes. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm teaching at a bunch of different universities, including Harrisburg University and University of North Carolina, Wilmington, and Post University and Hunter College, and really kind of focus on the esports and video game business kind of classes and media and digital media stuff. So it's really nice.
Nice, nice. Well, where do you see the esports industry evolving in terms of legal consideration over the next few years? And do you see more attorneys coming in to this space that you've kind of carved out for everyone to make their way here?
Well, yeah, I mean, I definitely think that you definitely see a rise in it. There's always more, esports attorneys and people coming in the space and working with, content creators and streamers and all of these, influencers, for better or worse, whatever we want to call that. And I think it's definitely just going to keep growing, obviously, as there's more opportunities here, there's more need for it, and it's more of a recognized need. There's just going to be more people flocking to it. And I think ultimately we're really just at the beginning of the legal issues. I think a lot of stuff initially might have been signed without legal counsel or without the right people. And sometimes a little bit later, you start to realize, oh, I signed an agreement I really don't like. Or, they're not upholding their end of the bargain and this, that, and the third. Times aren't as good as we thought they were going to be. And now they don't want to pay me as quick or ever. So I do think there's going to be, a lot more legal stuff happening, whether it's, litigation, where we started to see Tifu move that a little bit, and then, arbitration or these kind of things. And then another big thing I see is really salary caps. I think this in esports is going to be a really big legal issue because you've already seen the LEC and the LCK kind of adopt this, and you can't really have these restraints of trains here in America. U.S. labor law, like that's problem. That's the things that, the MLB and the NBA and all of these professional leagues have these collective bargaining agreements with these recognized labor unions for that exact reason. So, that's going to be a legal thing that they're going to have to deal with if that's the route that, the LCS and stuff follows, or any other league.
Yeah, because I know a couple of years ago, Call of Duty League tried to implement a salary cap, but without a union, players union, they were unable to hold teams to that salary cap. So I am curious. I do think a salary cap is needed in some instances, especially after COVID, the big influx of money, a lot of these players getting paid major money, and it just seems like some of these organizations they're taking a hit now, not being able to sustain these large contracts. Had there been some type of level off or some type of salary cap in place already, it would save both the player and the org, because if you're on an org that goes under, you're not getting paid anyway. So you kind of got to scratch each other's back and look at the atmosphere that you're in. It's been my thinking on it.
Yeah, I mean, actually, the Department of Justice fined, Activision Blizzard for imposing this undisclosed kind of salary cap in the Overwatch League and Call of Duty League. So they tried to kind of implement it without actually doing it, and as a result, they, got fined and really got in trouble. And I think that it's really hard in a free market, and obviously illegal becomes this monopoly antitrust violation, to say, okay, when all of us who are the only people that run these kind of business opportunities are only going to pay up to this amount. If you could have your own internal budgets and be like, this is what our budget is, and maybe the people on the other side should have been a little bit stricter adherence and maybe not try to keep up with the Joneses a little bit, like the Red Sox, Yankees, Dodgers philosophy of baseball doesn't necessarily translate to World Series every year, Yeah. So it's not always the people that can spend the most unlimited money that's going to win. And gaming is even much more of an equal playing field than, traditional sports are. You have super fast, strong guys, you're probably going to win in a 5-on-5 game, but the game changes that. So I think beyond that, it's a big problem. And to implement a salary cap and to say, okay, you collectively aren't going to be able to get more than this, there's no way that's going to fly. It's going to certainly be a violation, and it's certainly going to be a legal problem. So it's not something that they could collectively do, because the concerted effort is what the problem is, right? If you have all of these teams coming together and saying, we're not going to spend this much, or you're going to penalize you and whatever, it's it's a problem. So I don't know if it's actually going to happen. And in here in America, you would really need to have a true labor union
Yeah.
to actually agree for all these players. Okay, you guys know you're not going to be able to get any more than this money, and that takes away a lot of your leverage.
Yeah, I know. At least for Scump, they tried to work some like, hey, you can only make during that imposed 1 year of salary cap. Hey, we can only pay you this much, but we're also going to sign you as a content creator, and you're going to make bonus money. So there was always a way they worked around it. But again, Optic has a ton of money to do those crazy things, and not every org can sustain that kind of level. But on to another point here. We kind of touched a little bit on the imposement onto Activision Blizzard and stuff like that. Can you highlight some of the unique legal challenges that you yourself have faced in the esports industry, especially compared to some of your regular clients in the movie and music industry?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the biggest thing is, esports and gaming is like so 24/7 live streaming where like, you're kind of always on. And as a result, between social media and, Twitch and all these stream, like there's just so many more opportunities to say the wrong thing, do the wrong thing. Like you're just so much more exposed than most other traditional celebrities and influential people. When you're in that level, you're a professional athlete, musician, etc. You're only usually showing people like what you want them to see, right? It's a very curated experience.
Yeah.
Whereas with a streamer, content creator, game, like you're much more open. Like you're just sitting there like you, and it's like I see your whole back of your room and every single thing on your shelf, and what do you like to drink, and that you have a hockey stick, and all these things. So it's like you're a lot more exposed, you're a lot more interactive than maybe a traditional athlete is. So as a result, you have a lot more opportunities to, slip up, mess up. Like, we see this all the time of, you're in the game and you get killed by someone. You're like, holy blah, blah, blah. And you just say something. And you're just like, oh my God, my career's over right now. And you're just like, and it just, that is not as probably, you don't have as many opportunities for that to happen in the other entertainment worlds, right? Because you're not necessarily constantly broadcasting with a microphone and a camera in front of you.
Yeah, you're not bringing somebody into your personal space the way a streamer or a content creator would.
Yeah, and as a result, you have a lot more exposure if you do the wrong thing or say the wrong thing or something happens. Maybe something happens behind you, right? Or like the whole swatting thing, like that's a whole huge, legal thing in itself. Like I've never heard of that in any other industry. Like people finding out your address and sending the SWAT, like that's crazy to me. Like what's wrong with people?
Yeah.
Like, that's like a whole nother debate, but it's just kind of like, I don't even understand the logic of that.
I've never understood that either. There's a few things that certain fans or other people do that boggles my mind. I've said it before.
Please don't anyway swap me, but I'm just saying, like, I don't understand it, and that's like a whole, legal crazy thing. And I've had clients that were getting like cyber stalked by people because they give them, donation, and they think that like, oh, I gave you $100 donation, like,
yeah, they feel entitled.
Like you have to be friends with me, you have to talk to me, like. It's like, no, like nobody asked, like, and that's a whole nother kind of dynamic that goes on. Because like you said, you're interacting with people, you're letting them get a little bit more familiar with you than maybe you otherwise would.
Yeah. You touched on, somebody potentially sending like $100 donation and stuff like that. Do you have any advice to, maybe there's a person who's just starting streaming with starting to get an income coming in from this? Do you have any advice as far as them what to do with that money? Do you I see some people say claim the money, make sure you put it on your taxes. Some people say no, if it's donated to you, it's just in their bank account. What is the actual legal advice on that?
Yeah, so obviously I'm not giving anyone legal advice. It's just for
Well, yeah,
educational purposes only.
just me
But
and you
in general,
conversating.
yes, my book would say that a donation, even though it's called a donation, is not an actual non-taxable donation. It's them giving you money for providing a service. So unless you make over a certain amount of money, which I believe is like $600, you don't necessarily have to report it. So if someone gives you $5, that's all the money you've ever made through Streamlab, you probably don't need to put that $5 on your tax return. But if you're making $5,000 or even $500, and and you're spending money on like the point of declaring money is so that you can actually declare expenses related to your business, right? Like that's the real catch, and that's again stuff that you explore and why you have professionals around you to be like, okay, well, I'm spending all this money on equipment and editing software and designers and thumbnail designers and all these people. This is all part of my business. These are all business expenses. So if anything, the money that I'm making from donations and whatnot should be used to pay that, and that's a business expense, business, like in and out, and it's how you're able to operate a business. And it's not a taxable donation the same way if you're giving a donation to St. Jude's or something. They are not a charity by any means.
Gotcha. Well, sorry. That question actually just came to me, so sorry to throw left field at you, but it just popped in my head right when you said it, so I did want to touch on that for just a little bit. But now, you are on the board of advisors for the International Esports Journal. So what trends or developments are you currently keeping an eye on here in the esports world?
I mean, I think it's really interesting just to kind of see this trend of more universities and, more just general academics and scholars taking, esports and competitive gaming seriously, where you're having journals like that and other scholarly peer-reviewed publications existing, and them having studies that are looking at, really sports science, neurological, psychological matters, looking at competitive gaming and esports from a much more scholarly and analytic approach than just like, oh, this team is good or this is what happened, where you're actually having these peer-reviewed published articles in journals that are dedicated to this. And that's kind of like a whole new world in academia. If you think about every other area, sociology, psychology, chemistry, they have all these academic journals and you have all these published articles in them. So it's a nice trend to start seeing that happen, because it never was like that before, right? Maybe there was like a history of video game class or something like that, but now you're having academics creating these scholarly edits and then having other academics reviewing them, and we're all in the same community and knowledge base. So you have true credentialed people giving you feedback, right? It's not just you submitting it to the school journalism and getting some feedback. It's other professors who are professors in these fields giving you insight. And it's just starting to just really just, raise the whole level of literature and discourse around it. And I think that's really exciting.
Nice. Well, you were talking about, getting other peers and everything like that. So how do you approach handling, a peer client or the more diverse, because obviously you're going to become personally attached to certain clients. So is there certain ways that you handle, say, I'll just use myself. If I had a legal issue, we don't really know each other, and I'm coming from, the podcast world. Whereas, let's say you have a non-professional but a personal client who is a football star. If we have a similar, I guess you could say, situation, would those legal matters be handled, I'm trying to think of how to say it. If we have similar things, just because we're in different industries, would you still approach them the same way?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that what's nice and why I was able to kind of work in all of these creative worlds, from music to sports to art to fashion to authors and screenwriters and all kinds of gamers and such is because there's just a lot of similarities in the legal needs of all of these people. It's really these loan out companies, individually based on your personal brand. You have a lot of just similar needs. However, where the art comes in and what makes people that work in different industries unique is understanding the actual how the business works, how you actually operate. Being able to work in the music business, the sports world, esports, all these things at a really high level, and see how they kind of all interconnect. I'm really able to provide that wide knowledge and be able to assist people that kind of straddle those areas. So I find a really nice world where working with athletes who are trying to get in the gaming space, or musicians that are in the gaming space and trying to build those verticals, so essentially being able to kind of cross over these different entertainment segments and give them this unique knowledge that you need to execute in all of them. Like, I had this streamer that, she wanted to release some music. So it's like, okay, well, we got to get an agreement with your producer, and we got to make sure your ASCAP is here and your sound. And it's like, the same way I would advise, a DJ or any other musician client is the same way I'm going to advise you. It just so happened that you're also a gamer. So it's just really nice to be able to provide that. And because there's so much overlap, and I just see that's going to happen more and more, that it just really puts me in this, unique position to.
Yeah, you're in that sweet spot right now.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, I know we started the conversation talking about visas and everything like that. Now, as esports continues to grow globally, how do you navigate legal matters that involve international parties and jurisdictions?
I think the biggest thing is that each country has different laws, different regulations, and obviously you now have Japan opening up much more as like an esports and competitive gaming market, because previous to like 2018 they actually outlawed esports, so it was like against the law to have these competitive gaming for money. So as a result, until this law was changed, you didn't really have that as a whole marketplace. And then once they changed it, they created like a whole, Japanese esports union, which now regulates esports and who can get these, pro player licenses and who can operate teams there. So it's like that whole market just flipped on its side, right? From a market that was off the map to now one that's super highly regulated, and you have to figure out how to deal with Jesu, they're called, in order to do anything there. So I think when you're operating on this global scale, which is what esports really is, because obviously the internet doesn't really have boundaries. The video games might be on different servers, but you could switch servers. So it's really, you could be anywhere and access it. So as a result, you have to be familiar with kind of what's going on in a lot of the key places. And again, that's important. I do a lot of international trademark and IP law. So understanding the way that different countries regulate IP, whether it's trademark or copyright, is another important factor in this, because certain countries have stronger laws than others. So it's really understanding these nuances and how to do things properly.
Yeah, and I just see that continuing to grow, especially Dota, League of Legends, Rocket League. All these games have really blossomed. Apex Legends, they're really blossoming outside of the U.S. So I personally just can see that market continuing to grow.
Definitely. Mobile gaming is obviously huge in a lot of other areas as well. So there's just a lot of opportunity, especially on this global scale.
Now, of course, all these companies and everything like that, they need sponsorships and everything to grow. And of course, now you're getting into contracts between major entities. So how do you think the landscape of esports sponsorships and partnerships will change in the coming years, and what legal considerations should entities keep in mind?
I think that obviously we've seen sponsorship as a well-documented large generator of income for most teams, right? Most reports say 60, 70 or more percentage of most teams, a lot of events, like everything kind of goes through corporate money and the sponsors. So I don't think this is necessarily going to change. I just think that the audience that they're going to want is to continue to mature. Some of the younger generation that have really grown up with, esports and gaming as like, this is what we love, is going to get older. Their purchasing power is going to increase. So as a result, you're going to have more people that are going to be your potential audience and consumers. So that's definitely going to continue. But I think from more of, if you're entering into these agreements, there's a bunch of really important considerations. I think something that trips up a lot of people is kind of the exclusivity and non-compete and how that's all structured and how long that is and what categories it applies to and what territories and, what it kind of prevents you from doing. I once had a client that like we were going to do like a 1 month, like one-off stream with a company, and they wanted like a 6 month non-compete. And it was like, this literally makes no sense. Like, if we were doing a year or 2 year deal, yeah, maybe a 6 month non-compete might make sense. But to do one stream to be locked off from any competitor for 6 months, that doesn't make any sense unless they're giving you a ton of money.
Yeah.
So understanding this, I knocked that off quickly, and they said, oh yeah, you're right. And it wasn't a thing. But again, if you didn't realize that, and let's just say you do this deal and now another company comes to you and then you do the deal with them, there's other ones that be like, oh, well, you had a 6 month non-compete with us and you broke it. So, give us our money back and, more money because now we had to send you this letter. And understanding that and how it applies. And then I think also understanding how you get paid, how much you're going to get paid, and what happens if they're late, because everyone thinks about the number, but how does that actually come? Is it net 30? Is it net 60? Is it half up front to reserve you? Like, how you get paid is really important, and people really neglect that. And it's like, net 60 after the event. If the event isn't for 3 months, that means you're not getting paid for 7 months from when you sign that contract. That's probably not going to work for most people.
Yeah, and that's something I didn't even think about, as well as other sponsorships come along and affiliate contracts come, my way and my peers' way as well. That's something for us to definitely keep in mind.
And I think one other thing that I harp on and I really look at is like kind of the proper social media disclosures, the hashtag ad, hashtag sponsored. Like, people really forget some of this stuff. And there are, real penalties and liabilities that the FTC can, impose on people. And do I think it's going to happen today or tomorrow? No. But there is going to be a wide crackdown just because it's that important. If you're doing a post, you're getting something for free, like, people need to know that this is an ad, that there's this endorsement, testimonial angle to it. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, but people have to know that there's a reason why you're drinking this bottle of water and not some other bottle of water. And that's a really important legal thing that a lot of people kind of overlook. And I know the contract says that you have to do it right. So, it's really something that people need to be aware of as well.
Cool. So I'll ask this for my personal as well as to educate everybody out there. So if you are creating, let's say, a Twitter post, and I'll just say my Swift grips. If I'm promoting Swift grips, I need to let everybody know that, hey, this is a paid promotion. Otherwise, you could potentially face legal ramifications.
Yeah, so if you were like, hey, I love my, sweet grips, taking a picture of you using them, you got to put hashtag ad. Because, yeah, you may love them and you may want to use them, but there is some commercial relationship, whether it's free product or money or both. Like, your love for that product and use of the product is tied to something else, right? You're not just doing it. Like, if I'm just like holding up like, oh, I love this highlighter because it's so good, like, if this is a highlighter I just went out and bought and I bought it because I like it, then I could say that. There's not a sponsored ad. But if it was like, if Sharpie paid me to tell everyone how much I like this highlighter, then I need to be ad. Or if they give me a lifetime supply of highlighters, I may still love them. They may still be my favorite. But you should also know that I'm also telling you it's my favorite for a reason.
Yeah, you're being compensated for that opinion, so to speak. The opinion may be true, but you're still being compensated.
Yeah,
I
so you
got
as a
you.
consumer know to take that with, oh, well, why are, sweet grips better than sweaty grips? Because, they're probably kind of the same for all intents and purposes. But, sweaty grips didn't give you a bunch of stuff. Sweet grips did. So,
I got you.
anyway.
See, and now I know. And that's something that I didn't know, and I wasn't told by anybody. So that's actually something new for me. So see, I'm already learning some stuff.
And
Now,
that's in my book as well.
see, I'm gonna have to pick this up because it is sounding like it's gonna be a must read for me, and probably a must read for most of my listeners as well. Now, as someone you've of course completed your bar in New York, and you have experience in U.S. district courts. How do federal laws impact esports, and are there any ongoing legislative developments that we should be aware of?
Yeah, I think, because copyright and trademark law are both federal laws, a lot of the stuff that I do and just a lot of the stuff related to the esports and gaming is just in that realm because, the game is a copyrighted work. So the owner of it, the game publisher or developer, has the copyright in it. So anything related to it kind of implements their copyright. There's also trademark laws in like their game's name or some of the characters like, Mario and Pikachu, etc. So all of it really kind of fits into this federal world. There's not really any pending legislation related to esports or gaming right now. I think the biggest stuff is obviously around gambling and wagering on esports and how that's all happening. And then what I mentioned earlier, something that I believe needs to happen is kind of these visa immigration law changes. I believe that there needs to be some legislation, some carve out, and something that some congressman just gets behind because it's like, hey, if we make it easier for players and teams and organizers to get visas to come here for this, they're going to do more events and we're going to have more reasons to have these big events in different cities here. Like any statistic says that after a city has a major event, they make millions of dollars, right? Like the Super Bowl and the Olympics and World Cup and all of these events show that. And, you've had League of Legends and all these big championship events, and they made millions of dollars for the hosting city. So a big hurdle is the costs to get the visas, the way the legislation is structured, and just the time where like you have, what we started with, you have players missing tournaments because they can't get it in time. Or they didn't want to spend the extra, double the price to do the expedited thing. Or, you get an officer that doesn't know what they're saying and now it delays it 6 months and you're just in this loop of trying to get it through. So it's having legislation that kind of fixes this and makes it a little bit more in line with the industry will incentivize growth, will incentivize operators to do more stuff here, do it consistently, and that would help all of us.
Yeah, well, what's funny is I was just talking. The previous guest was Mike Schwartz from OG Sports, and he was saying that when he was with oh man, it's the LA based team.
Valent, maybe Valent, right?
No, it wasn't Valent. Was it Valent? It might have been Valent. But he was saying that he was trying to get visas for some of his international players, and there was another LA team with that same name from back in the day that had, closed down and debunked. And so the immigration officer that they were dealing with, of course, Googled them to see if they were a real company, saw the debanked one, and was like, oh, no, this denied everybody right away. And he said it was like a 6-month process to get them to review it, to show that, hey, we're legit. We're
different than those. We're not the same.
Yeah, and it just set them back. Yeah, and like you said, 6 months to get it back on track.
And that's like a whole season, right? Like how long is the season of Overwatch or Call of Duty? What, 6 months, 8 months? Like it's not year round.
Yeah. Now, as a, of course, supporter of Garden State Esports, How do you see the esports community contributing to local and regional development? And do you want to kind of shout out and let everybody know about Garden State Esports?
Yeah, so Garden State Esports is a scholastic operator in New Jersey. They run high school and middle school esports events. They have about 60 to 70% of the state, and they run these local school on school competitions, and then these really big championship finals every semester at a different college. They've done it at Rutgers and Keene and Stockton and a bunch of universities in New Jersey. And I believe that the scholastic, recreation, youth, like that's the future of this. Like the non-professional, the more, hey, we're doing this because we love it, it's fun. That's where most people are going to lie. That's where the mass of people are. You only have a certain fraction that are going to be competitive, that are going to be pros, and that are going to be really interested in that. So I'm really involved in the collegiate space, the high school, the K through 12, because I think that's where there's just the most growth and the most sustainability, where it's like, why is Little League baseball and Little League soccer and all, like, there's going to be Little League of Legends and Little League Madden, and the same way you're going to have 5 people to go play basketball at the local league, you're going to have your 5 that's going to go play 2K in your 2K league every week. When is that going to be? It's starting. And, you have organizations like Garden State Esports and some others that are trying to use high schools and middle schools as a way to kind of build
that grassroots movement.
Yeah, and it's the same way they have a football team or a basketball team or swimming is the same way they have an esports program that has Rocket League and Smash and, all these games, Valorant, etc.
Cool. And is that something that you see potentially spreading out, not just from the New York area, but, across the U.S. as well?
Yeah, I mean, there's independent leagues in Wisconsin and Florida and Texas. It's really sprouting. You're starting to see it in a lot of states, and it's just how does it function? Does it function with the government, the Department of Education within that parameters, or is it more an independent organization where people are just kind of creating it almost as like a club thing after school? So each state is kind of approaching it differently, and I think you're going to see it changing over time where, California obviously being one of the largest states initially did an exclusive deal with Play VS, and then more recently they changed to, I think, another one instead. So it's going to depend on what the state's going to do. Are they going to develop their own internal thing the way they regulate every other, interstate high school athletics, or is it going to be in its own world? So we're going to see how that all goes.
Nice. I'm excited to see where that goes. I've got just a couple more questions for you. I do appreciate you coming on with me. But with your background in intellectual property law, how do you advise clients on protecting their creative works? Because I know we've been talking about brand recognition and copyright. So how, let's say I create my logo for Rival Media and the podcast and everything, how would I go about protecting my creative works?
Well, yeah, so I think the two biggest protections in the intellectual property world that we look at are both trademarks and copyright. So trademarks are really related to your brand name, your gamer tag, kind of what you're operating as. So to me, the gamer tag is the same thing as a musician's name or your band name or your artist's name. It's this thing that you're performing to the world as, and you're performing live gaming services or endorsement services or whatever it is under this name. So that's probably one of the most common ones that professional gamers, streamers, teams, all these businesses would have. And then beyond that, you have copyright, which really protects more of a creative work. So if you have a logo or a song, an animation, an intro, or a photo or a video, again, a creative thing as opposed to your brand name. So in your instance, you potentially could trademark, the media company's name as a media company and production of media, as well as potentially as a podcast itself, whatever the podcast name is. And then you might be able to copyright the logo. You might even, trademark the logo as well, and potentially copyright the finished episodes if you have an intro song. So there's a lot of different things that creatives have, but the most common ones that they use are, trademark to kind of protect their name, as well as copyright to protect their different creative, assets and such.
Nice. Now, what role do you believe legal education plays in preparing the next generation of professionals for the rapidly evolving world that we call esports?
Well, I mean, as previous question, like definitely read my book if you're really trying to get into it. But I think that it's really important, academia and, having academic experiences and actually going through this process is really important. You're learning how to work in a professional way. You're learning, useful information, because it's important to understand how to operate legally and properly. Because if you're starting to make a lot of money, start to do this really successful, the worst thing would be happen is if you didn't do it properly early on, and now you have all these problems, and it's much more costly to fix. Right? Like I'm talking with this big streamer, and it's like he signed this agreement, and it's like they get like 20% of everything. And it's like, well, like you really kind of signed this agreement, so we really can't now just say, oh, we only want to give you 10% because we don't want to give you this much. Like you don't really have grounds to do that, right? Like there's not so like, yeah, we can send a letter, yeah, we can mess around, maybe we can be like, oh, well, we're not going to work with, like, you can start threatening stuff like, oh, you're gonna have to sue me, I'm gonna go somewhere else. Like you can start trying to be, get aggressive and whatever, but you got to realize that if you sign an agreement and someone didn't really stick a gun to your head, like, and you're 18 or plus, like this is going to be enforceable. So I think people need to really understand that when you're starting out, when you're starting to really do this as a career professionally, taking this seriously, you need to take care of these legal things. You need to make sure that, the gamer tag or whatever that you're going to use and build around, there isn't something else that's going to stop you or someone else that's using it. And, that is a really important thing. I think that there was an example of some Valorant team that like made the Valorant league, and their name was like Squirtle Squad. It's like, well, obviously you shouldn't name your team name a Pokemon name, because you're probably not going to be able to use that, and you probably aren't going to be able to sell merch and build a whole brand and business around your name, right? So it's like, that's kind of the things that you think about early on. It's like, why am I going to spend this time and money and effort, whether it's money or your own resources? Time is money for, most people, and build something you can't even own, you can't even have. So I'm always from like, yeah, it might be a little bit more than you might think at the beginning, but if you don't do it right and you are successful and it matters, it's going to cost you way more to fix it, or you're just not going to be able to fix it. Like you just have to change your name, because you're not going to be Squirtle Squad, because unless you're going to spend $1 zillion to get a license from Pokemon to call yourself that, but you're not.
Yeah, you'll end up like Pale World right now and facing legal ramifications.
Yeah, you'll have to change your name, and now it's like, oh, well, this is foolish that like we spent all this time getting lost recognition, and now we have to like restart with a new name, and it's just an anecdote that lawyers talk about and use you as an example. So, I think that's one of those things where like people don't necessarily realize it until it's almost too late. But coming from the traditional sports world and entertainment space, and I think that kind of like ties together, is this is so much more ingrained in those worlds. Having an agent, having a manager, having a music attorney, a lawyer, someone that looks at your contracts, helps you all this stuff. It's so much more common. It's part of the folklore almost, right? Like from Entourage to Arliss to Jerry Maguire to, Ballers with The Rock. Like this whole, like, it's part of pop cult. Like people know, but it's not really like that in this space yet. It's really new. But people are making so much money. It's like when you're making 4, 5, 6, 7 figures, like that's real. Like, yeah, if you're making $20 a month off Twitch, like you're making $20 a month off Twitch, you're probably spending more on ads than you're making, right? But if you're making $200 a month or $2,000 a month or 20, like, each zero, the ramifications go up, and you never know when it's going to happen. Like, last story, and then we can bring it towards an end, was, I had this big streamer that I talked to maybe a week or two ago, and he's like, out of nowhere, my numbers are going crazy. Like, I was averaging a couple thousand, I'm averaging like hundreds of thousands of viewers and like making $1 million on this platform and that one. And it's like, He's like, I don't know what to do. Like, I used to have this many subs and now I have 10 times that. And like, it's a great problem to have. But if you're an 18, 19-year-old kid, it's like, now I'm making 6 figures plus from like Twitch. Like, what do I do? Like, how do I deal with this? And these are the things that if you would have had certain things done early on or been ready for it, I'm like, great, like just throw it in there. Like now I can get a new PC and now I can, bankroll all the tournaments for the upcoming year, go to all these conferences and, like really level up my business. So, I think that's the really important thing is that you have to do it and be aware of it so that if you are, and hopefully you are successful, you'll be in the best position to, be in the best position, right? That's the best you could say.
You got to start at least looking at the pathway you want to take and kind of start paving that road, even if, you never lay the asphalt down, you got to at least start clearing the land and making sure you make the way. So to speak, at least. But my final thing for you, you, of course, you just attended a art opening. You've been to the New York Esports Awards and everything like that. Where are you finding the time to game, and what game are you playing right now?
Right, gaming. When you're in gaming and all these entertainment worlds, you never get enough time to game. But I'm definitely a big Marvel Snap guy, so that's definitely a game that I'm, be able to bring on the road and play a lot. 2K and StarCraft are definitely things that I can get in when I can, but definitely on a daily Marvel Snap grind and gaming other stuff whenever I can.
Nice. Well, of course, let everybody know where they can reach you and where they can get your book at, because I know I'll be linking it through your Twitter as well. That way I can go get a copy of that. But let everybody else know where they can reach you and where they can get that book at.
Well, yeah, thanks so much for having me. And everyone follow me on Twitter, JustinJESQ, or check my website, jmjesq.com. I've got lots of articles and my email is there and, links to my books. You can get it everywhere. Books are sold, Amazon, Barnes & Noble. It's, soft cover. Go with the soft cover. The hardcover is definitely too pricey, or, ebook for those for your, Nook or Kindle. So anywhere you get books, it's there. And, reach out to me. My DMs are open. I'm always happy to connect and, help people that are in need.
Cool. And if you want to look at his stats, Justin is if I get this wrong, please correct me, 7-time Superstar award coming from the New York Lawyers. I forget the exact.
SuperLawyer. So SuperLawyer Rising Star in IP law. Yeah. So 7 years in a row. SuperLawyer Rising Star in the intellectual property in New York City. So, like I said, handle a lot of this stuff at a very high level.
Nice. Well, thank you so much for coming on and talking with us. I know I definitely learned a lot, and I'll be watching this episode back myself a few times just to make sure that I follow and understand exactly what I need to do to make sure I'm going down the right path in the future. And I will be copping that book probably once we get off this call. I'll place in that order. So, again, thank you so much for coming on, and I hope to have you back on. I want to do a roundtable with some guys on the state of esports, so hopefully we can make that happen down the line. But Justin, man, anything you want to say before we cut out?
This is great. I really appreciate the opportunity. And like I said, anyone that wants to talk or learn more, I'm always here and always open for roundtables.
Nice. One last thing. You do also have your own podcast, correct?
Yes, I have the Esports Biz Show, which has been, kind of my little side fun that I've been doing for about the last 3 years. We're almost at 150 episodes, and I just interview different people from different areas of the esports and content creator world. And, check that out on YouTube or follow me on Twitter for everything.
Nice. Make sure y'all go check that out. Give them a follow, guys. Thank you again so much for tuning in. And thank you, Justin, for coming on and talking with me. But until next time, guys. Peace.
The Gamer's Edge podcast is brought to you in part by Swift Grips. Get 20 off your next order by using code RIVAL at checkout.